Good morning, Branches. It's Sunday again, May 31st, and we're still waiting on our room to be finished. It should be finished maybe in September. So let's have a prayer first. Father, thank you for how you looked out for our class. You have protected us. You have protected our families, and we thank you for it. We ask you to be with these first responders and these nurses and doctors, that you would keep them safe from this virus. And we just ask you to bless us and bless this time of study. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, of all the parables Jesus taught, I think this parable we are about to study uncovers some of the biggest mysteries that Christians ponder. The first one is, why is it that some people respond to the gospel and some do not? And the second one is, what causes some who claim to be saved, but after a short period of time, they disappear and you never see them back at church or anywhere? You wonder what happened. And the third one is, why are some believers stronger in the faith than others? So let's look at Matthew 13. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Some seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. So this parable is actually about the gospel, and it's about the soil that the gospel can land on, that soil being people. I have a feeling that across the way, while Jesus was teaching, a farmer may have actually been sowing some seed, and the people could relate to exactly what Jesus was saying. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds like a great way of teaching. I remember one time I planted some fescue grass, and I had some of these same results. Wherever the seed fell, it determined how it would grow. And if I got over to the side where the ground was not prepared, the seed did not do well at all. Fescue seed pops straight up where it's planted, and it does not spread like Bermuda does. It just grows right straight up from that seed. So if any landed in an area that was not well tilled, it wouldn't last long. It would die. It could not establish any root. Now some fescue seed is coated where the birds would not be attracted. But I'm here to tell you that if a flock of birds landed on a newly seeded area and you didn't have that coating, those birds would have a feast, and most of your seed would be gone. Now the disciples had a good question. They asked Jesus, why teach in parables? And so Jesus is about to tell them why, starting in verse 10. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. That's a key verse right here. Let me let me go back to the beginning of verse 15. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. This all seems rather harsh, that the eyes of Israel had been blinded and their ears stopped up. They hear the words, they see the works of Christ, but to them, all he told them was a story about a farmer who spread some seed, and it would have no spiritual significance whatsoever to them. Those who do have understanding of spiritual things, though, will receive even more. Is it fair to blind those who do not understand? Well, verse 15 has the answer. It was a heart condition, a calloused heart. And this may explain what Jesus said about this next verse in Matthew chapter 7. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Wow, that's a scary verse. Of course, dogs back then weren't sweet little innocent things that jump in our laps and we pet on them. Dogs were a bit wilder back in the days of Jesus. Now, John Phillips, I've read from his commentaries quite a bit, helps us understand these verses that we just read. We are not to entrust spiritual things, valuable things, holy things to those who have revealed themselves to be apostates, false teachers, false shepherds. Rather, we are to be discerning and withhold from such dogs and swine any place among God's people, lest they trample holy things and pearls under their feet and turn again and rend us. False teachers see nothing of value in pearls, a fitting symbol of Christ's sufferings, or holy things. Beware of dogs, Paul warned in Philippians 3:2. Without our dogs, John declared when referring to those who are eternally barred from entering the gates of the holy city. That's in Revelation 22. Down through the centuries, the church has been rent and torn by dogs and swine. Constantine gave holy things to dogs when he espoused the cause of Christianity and threw open the doors of the church to the world. That's all true, because when Constantine became a Christian and declared Christianity to be legal, then a lot of pagans would flood into the church, and a lot of pagan ideas ended up in the church. And it took Martin Luther to get some of those out. So let's see what else Paul says about this. In Romans 11, he's talking about the Jews here. He said, "Again I asked, did they stumble so far as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgression means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring? I am talking to you Gentiles, insomuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people to envy and save some of them. For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life to the dead?" So God's using turning his attention to the Gentiles to make the Jews envious. But there will be a day when the Jews will see and they will acknowledge Messiah. It's in Zechariah 12. "And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one who grieves for a firstborn son. So one of these days, the Jews will look at Christ and realize what they have lost and who they killed. So we ask, what does this parable mean? Well, Jesus gives you the answer starting in verse 16. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last for only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. So, here's what we know. The seed represents the gospel. It is sown by preachers and teachers and evangelists and missionaries and all types of Christians in all different ways and all different times. The seed, being the gospel, falls on the soil, and the soil is really the heart of the hearers. Some of those hearers have a calloused heart. Some of them may have a greedy heart. Different kinds of hearts. But then there are some who have good hearts, whose hearts are not calloused. So when the gospel goes out, it can have 4 results. One of 4 results. This little picture is worded differently than the NIV worded, but this first one is the packed soil. That's the path. And this is a hard heart, and the devil can snatch it away because that person is more aligned with Satan than he is with God. And unfortunately, that person is lost. The next one is stony ground. The NIV called it rocky ground. And the gospel sounded pretty good to that person, and they made a decision to follow Christ and even join the church. But they had no root, no good foundation. They had a weak understanding of the gospel and how believers are expected to live. There was no total commitment to the church or to Christ, and when things got tough, they gave up and left. This person may have had an emotional, not an inspirational experience. There is a difference. Emotional experiences don't last too long, whereas inspirational experiences will never go away. They ran down front, they signed a card, and got the right hand of Christian fellowship, and found out that the Christian life was not instant prosperity or a quick and easy fix to their problems. And as a result, they just faded away. They could not take any heat of persecution also. If anybody persecuted them because of Christianity, they would back away. And sadly, these people are also lost. There's a third person, the weeds. Here it's called thorny ground. This person hears the word, but is more worried about themselves and money to make this decision fruitful. So I think they must have some greed issues here. The Christian life is all about dying to ourselves and dedication to Christ and depending on Him for our needs and actually caring about others more than we do ourselves. So as a result, this person falls away. And sadly, these persons are also lost. But the gospel sometimes falls on good soil. And I don't understand what causes some to be good soil. And I don't think we understand it either. Now, the Calvinists would explain by saying that they were the elect and that their salvation was predestined. And the others would say that the gospel message pierced their heart and the gospel had the power to save and that mankind is responsible for their decision. Well, we won't get into that one. And I do not know how to cultivate a good heart in our little ones. I don't know that we can, but they do copy what they see in us. And so we can nurture them in Christian faith as best we can and be the best examples that we can. I've often wondered if God blesses families based on an ancestor in the past who served God faithfully, because from the good soil comes this harvest. And I would think that the harvest would spread through a family also, and the gospel gets planted over and over again and has abundance. I know in my own family, I had one side of my family was extremely faithful to God, and the other side were a bunch of rascals and drunks. So did God bless me and that bless my side of the family because of the faithfulness of someone in the past? I cannot say for sure. Children will mimic their parents, and if their parents are godless, this can pass on down to the children. Goodness and faithfulness can also be copied, and children tend to do what they see. And another thing I've noticed is that the bad soil can all of a sudden become good soil. That's beyond my understanding, how you can have a strong atheist and all of a sudden they hear the gospel and they follow Christ. This is because the power to save is in the gospel. So never give up on anyone, but continue to pray for the lost. If it's a family member or a friend, never give up, as Winston Churchill used to say. Here are some people who were strong atheists, and they were bad soil, and then they became good soil. Because the power is in the gospel. Calloused hearts can become softened. Look at what Paul says here in Romans 1. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. So we who believe, we're all just a bunch of farmers. And we are to sow the seed of the gospel. And we cannot see what type of soil that gospel falls on. That's not our job to know that. All we do is just sow. But I like this saying from a fellow named D.T. Niles. He said, Christianity is one beggar telling another beggar where he found bread. And that's pretty much us. We were once beggars too. But when we find this bread of life, we find that we are fed. And we want to tell other beggars where to find this bread. So never give up on this gospel. This gospel is mankind's only hope. So thank you, and we'll talk to you again next week.